While the world's cameras are fixed on Gaza and Ukraine, another war is unfolding, one far deadlier, far quieter, and far more forgotten. It is happening right here in Africa, in Sudan, a country once described as the heart of the Nile where fertile land meets the Red Sea and gold sleeps beneath the sand. Today it has become a graveyard of dreams. Entire families have vanished between borders. Villages lie in ashes. Mothers walk for days with their children searching for food, for water, for peace, but finding none. 12 million people have already fled their homes. 14 million are starving. And yet, the world looks away. No breaking news tickers, no monuments lit in solidarity, just silence. But behind that silence lies something darker, a story of greed, betrayal, and control. Sudan's war isn't just about two generals fighting for power. It's about who gets to own Africa's wealth, its gold, its land, its people, and who gets to write the continent's next chapter. For years, foreign powers have drawn invisible lines across Africa, trading our peace for their profits. And Sudan has now become their newest chessboard. Every bullet fired there protects a business interest. Every refugee is the cost of someone's empire. So tonight, as you watch this, I want to ask you, is this truly a civil war, or is it a carefully designed project? One handshake, one contract, one betrayal at a time. Because if Sudan's story feels distant, it shouldn't. It is Africa's reflection and a warning to the world. If you believe that truth still matters, if you believe peace is worth fighting for, then please, share this story. Stand for Sudan. Because silence has never saved anyone. Sudan's tragedy did not begin overnight. It was built one decision, one betrayal, one bullet at a time. The story starts with two men who once stood side by side, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, head of the Sudanese armed forces, and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known to the world as Hemeti, commander of the feared Rapid Support Forces, the RSF. For years, they were brothers in arms. Together they toppled Sudan's longtime dictator Omar al-Bashir, a man who ruled for 3 decades through fear and silence. The world celebrated that moment. Sudan was supposed to be free. But history in Africa has a painful rhythm. When one strong man falls and the system remains, another one rises from the dust. That rhythm is playing again. Soon after Bashir's fall, the alliance between Burhan and Hemeti crumbled. Power, as always, became the poison. The generals began to circle each other like vultures over the same carcass, the state itself. They fought not just for political control, but for everything that keeps a nation alive, the land, the wealth beneath it, and the loyalty of those left to defend it. At the center of this conflict lies one thing: gold. Sudan holds some of the richest untapped gold deposits on the African continent. But that gold, instead of feeding its people, has become a weapon. It is smuggled out daily through desert airstrips, truck convoys, and secret trade routes stretching into Chad and Libya. And when those shipments reach the Gulf, they no longer bear Sudan's name. They are melted, refined, and sold to the world as Emirati gold. According to Amnesty, International, weapons made in China and supplied by the United Arab Emirates have been traced directly to RSF fighters on the ground. The very nation that denies its involvement in the war is one of the biggest importers of Sudan's smuggled gold. In other words, the more Sudan bleeds, the more someone else profits. That is why calling this a civil war is misleading. What is happening in Sudan is a business model disguised as conflict. Burhan's forces fight to preserve what's left of the state. Hemeti's RSF fights to control the mines, the borders, and the flow of money. And in the shadows, investors and governments far from Khartoum are financing both sides, ensuring the war never truly ends. Meanwhile, the human cost rises. The once bustling streets of Khartoum now echo with gunfire and grief. Hospitals have been bombed. Markets stand empty. Farmers can no longer reach their land because militias patrol the fields that once grew food for millions. When you hear reports of clashes or skirmishes, understand what those words hide. Families who dig shallow graves with their bare hands. Children who haven't eaten in days. Mothers who watch the skies for planes. They cannot stop. And while the world debates sanctions and summits, Sudan's gold continues to flow out and new weapons continue to flow in. The cycle feeds itself: violence funding profit and profit fueling more violence. To many outsiders, this looks like another African war, chaotic, tribal, hopeless. But that narrative is a lie. Sudan didn't collapse because its people wanted war. It collapsed because others saw opportunity in its chaos. That is the uncomfortable truth. Peace in Africa threatens those who profit from instability. Every ceasefire signed in Sudan has been broken not by chance, but by design, because peace would stop the gold trade, stop the land sales, stop the flow of power. Sudan's war is not about religion. It is not about ethnicity. It is about control, who controls Africa's most precious resources and who benefits from its endless suffering. And until the world calls this war by its true name, an economic invasion masked as civil conflict, the smoke over Khartoum will never clear. As the months dragged on, Sudan's war reached a point of no return. The world might have stopped watching, but the flames kept rising. What began as a battle between two generals has become a humanitarian nightmare. Entire cities like Khartoum Omdurman and El Fasher now resemble ghost towns, buildings shredded by bullets, markets turned into military outposts, and hospitals overflowing with the wounded. The Rapid Support Forces, once a paramilitary born out of the Janjaweed militias in Darfur, have become a full-blown war machine. Backed by smuggled weapons and foreign money, they spread through the country like a storm. Villages that once smelled of harvest and river water now reek of smoke and death. And in the middle of all this, the people, the very heart of Sudan, are trapped. Mothers clutch their children as they walk through deserts toward Chad, South Sudan, or Egypt. The lucky ones make it to refugee camps, overcrowded tents that bake under the sun by day and freeze at night. The unlucky ones never make it at all. 12 million displaced, 14 million hungry. Those numbers are not statistics. They are a nation's heartbeat fading in real time. Meanwhile, somewhere far from the chaos, in boardrooms, in glass towers, in air-conditioned hotels, men in suits continue to sign deals, gold contracts, land leases, investment memorandums. Every page they sign is written in Sudanese blood. This is the moment when outrage begins to rise not from the so-called global community, but from Africans themselves. Social media fills with hashtags, Nanch stand for Sudan, Nanch stop the war, Nanch African lives matter too. Young Africans from Nairobi to Lagos, from Johannesburg to Accra, begin to question the silence of their own leaders. Why, they ask, do we march for Gaza, pray for Ukraine, but say nothing for our brothers in Sudan? And they are right to ask. Because the African Union, the body meant to defend the continent, has once again failed to act. Its statement condemning the atrocities in El Fasher came months late after villages had already vanished. No summit, no sanctions, no serious intervention, just words. Only South Africa raised its voice condemning RSF's attacks through its foreign ministry, a small spark in a sea of silence. But the silence isn't just neglect, it's complicity. Some governments like Kenya have been accused of hosting peace talks by day and shaking hands with warlords by night. In Nairobi, RSF leaders were reportedly welcomed to discuss a so-called transitional government. To many Sudanese watching from exile, that moment felt like betrayal. Because while Sudan burns, its neighbors are busy protecting their interests, ports, borders, trade routes, anything but people. Then came the moment that broke many hearts across Africa. Videos emerged online, grainy, shaky clips recorded on phones showing young Sudanese men stripped and beaten by militias. Their cries pierced through the noise of the internet. For a brief moment, Africa looked, Africa listened, and Africa wept. That was the emotional peak, the breaking point when silence turned into shame. You could feel the tremor of realization this wasn't just Sudan's tragedy anymore. It was Africa's mirror. The same foreign hands funding weapons in Darfur were the same hands signing development deals in other African capitals. The same companies refining gold in Dubai were investing in Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. And slowly people began connecting the dots. The war in Sudan, the exploitation in Congo, the debt traps in Ghana, the farmland sales in Kenya, all threads of the same fabric woven by greed. For the first time, ordinary Africans began to understand the pattern: destabilize, divide, extract. And with every cycle, Africa loses something: a generation, a dream, a future. In that realization lies the true climax of Sudan's story. It is not the battle of bullets. It is the awakening of conscience, the moment when the continent starts to see itself stripped bare and asks, how long will we let this happen under our watch? Sudan's war has exposed the betrayal of politics and the failure of leadership. But it has also revealed something powerful, that the spirit of unity and resistance still lives even in the ashes. And that spirit is now spreading from Sudan's refugees to Africa's youth, from silent observers to awakened voices. A realization that if one African nation falls, all will feel the quake. When the dust of war settles, what remains is not just rubble, it is the quiet collapse of a nation's soul. Sudan today is more than a battlefield. It is a cautionary tale of how power and profit can erase an entire society. The civil institutions that once held the country together, the schools, hospitals, courts, and local councils are gone, burned, looted, abandoned. A whole generation of children no longer knows the sound of a classroom bell. The only sound they hear is the drone of warplanes and the distant echo of gunfire. Economically, Sudan has been stripped bare. Gold that could have built hospitals now pays for bullets. Farmland that could feed the hungry now serves foreign markets. The currency has collapsed. Inflation is devouring savings. A bag of flour costs what a month's salary used to. The country's central bank is barely functional. Salaries for public workers are unpaid. Entire ministries have fled the capital. This is not just poverty, it is organized decay, because behind every missing dollar and every burned warehouse lies a network of men profiting from destruction. Every warlord with access to a gold mine has become a politician. Every smuggler is now a businessman. The line between crime and government has blurred into dust. Socially, the impact is devastating. Families are scattered across borders. Refugee camps in Chad and South Sudan are overflowing. Diseases spread faster than aid. Women face unspeakable violence, many targeted for belonging to the wrong community, others simply because chaos has stripped all protection from their lives. The once vibrant Sudanese middle-class doctors and teachers and engineers now survive on remittances or flee abroad in search of dignity. But perhaps the most painful wound is trust in leadership, in unity, in the very idea of an African solution for African problems. Because as Sudan burned, many African presidents looked away. They attended summits, smiled for photos, and spoke of regional stability while millions of Sudanese cried for help. The African Union, founded on the dream of collective defense, has once again been reduced to a press release. "We condemn the atrocities," the statement said, a sterile sentence that cannot bury the dead nor feed the hungry. Inside Sudan, politics has turned into survival. Local communities now run their own justice through tribal elders or armed groups. Cities have fragmented into zones controlled by whoever has more guns. There is no functioning parliament, no national dialogue, no roadmap for peace. And yet beneath this despair, something new is forming, a quiet resistance. Ordinary citizens, students, and diaspora networks have started creating underground humanitarian corridors. They smuggle medicine where governments have failed. They share verified information online, mapping safe zones, connecting stranded families. They are rebuilding trust from below, one act of courage at a time. These are not the stories that make headlines, but they are the stories that keep a nation breathing. Politically, Sudan's collapse has sent shockwaves beyond its borders. Neighboring states now face rising refugee flows, armed smuggling, and cross-border tensions. Chad and Egypt are struggling to absorb displaced populations. South Sudan, fragile itself, fears the contagion of instability. For Africa's regional order, Sudan's war is a mirror showing everything that is broken: weak institutions, external manipulation, and the hypocrisy of leaders who preach sovereignty while selling their nations to foreign investors. And yet in that mirror, there is also a reflection of possibility, that out of this suffering, Africans may finally realize that peace cannot be imported, nor rented, nor negotiated by those who profit from its absence. Because when a nation loses its voice, the silence spreads. And Sudan's silence, if it continues, will echo through the entire continent. To understand Sudan's war from a global perspective, we must step back, not to look away, but to see the full picture. Because what is happening in Sudan is not isolated chaos. It is the symptom of a world order that still treats Africa as a marketplace, not a continent of nations. From Washington to Brussels, from Dubai to Beijing, the language is always the same: stability, development, partnership. But behind those words are contracts, concessions, and the same quiet bargains that have defined centuries of extraction. In the United States, Sudan's tragedy has barely broken through the noise of domestic politics. News outlets mention it in passing, wedged between election polls and stock market updates. Yet, if you listen carefully, you will hear echoes of history, the same justifications once used for Iraq, Libya, or Afghanistan. We want to bring peace. We want to help rebuild. But rebuild for whom and at what price? Because let's be honest, when it comes to Africa, Western engagement often begins with humanitarian aid but ends with corporate interest. The same nations that condemn violence are quietly signing mining deals, funding NGOs that double as intelligence fronts, or pushing for peacekeeping operations that secure access to strategic zones. Sudan, with its gold, its fertile land, and its Red Sea coastline, is too valuable to be left alone. And in this silence, new actors have stepped in. The United Arab Emirates, accused of bankrolling RSF and smuggling Sudanese gold, is not just playing a regional game, it's executing a survival strategy. With oil reserves declining, the Gulf's wealth now depends on control over Africa's land and ports. Every deal signed in Sudan, Somalia, or Eritrea gives the Emirates one more foothold in Africa's maritime future, a modern version of empire building wrapped in the language of investment. Meanwhile, China, always patient and deliberate, watches and waits. It offers infrastructure instead of weapons, but its interests are no less strategic. A port here, a railway there, a digital hub, all part of the quiet contest for influence along the Red Sea corridor. Russia, too, seeks entry, negotiating for naval bases while offering weapons in return. And the world lets it happen. Because as long as African nations remain divided, foreign powers can keep playing them against each other. Sudan's pain to them is an equation manageable, profitable, and far away. For the American viewer, this should sound familiar. We have seen it before in Vietnam, where proxy wars were fought under the banner of ideology, in the Middle East, where partnerships became pipelines of exploitation. Today, the theater has simply shifted south. The question is no longer whether the world cares about Sudan, but whether it can afford to. Because if Africa becomes a playground for competing powers, the ripple will reach every shore. Economic migration, resource shocks, climate collapse, all of it is interconnected. In truth, Africa's wars are no longer local. They are global transactions written in African blood. And when peace becomes a commodity, the entire moral balance of the world is at stake. So when Americans or Europeans ask, why should we care about Sudan? The answer is simple: because every empire built on the suffering of others eventually consumes itself. If the world continues to look away, it is not only Sudan that will fall, it is our shared humanity that will erode piece by piece until nothing remains but profit and regret. Peace in Sudan would mean something far greater than the end of a war. It would mean that Africa for once is free to decide its own destiny, and that is exactly why peace remains forbidden, because a peaceful Sudan would be able to set the price of its own gold. It would feed itself from its own land. It would build its own industries and chart its own course on the Red Sea. And for the powers that profit from instability, that is the greatest threat of all. This is why every time a peace deal is signed, new weapons appear. Why every time hope flickers, it is smothered by greed. Why every African conflict seems to end the same way, with foreign signatures on African soil. But Sudan's story is not over yet. It is still being written by mothers who refuse to give up, by journalists who still report from the ruins, by doctors performing surgeries with candlelight because the power grid is gone. They are the guardians of Africa's dignity. They are the proof that even in darkness, courage survives. And this is where you and I come in. Because silence has never stopped a war. Silence is what allows it to continue. If the world could illuminate monuments for Gaza and flood timelines with flags for Ukraine, then surely Africa deserves the same light. Sudan deserves to be seen. The mothers walking barefoot across deserts deserve to be remembered. The children hiding under broken roofs deserve to be counted. This is not just a call for solidarity, it is a call for self-respect. For too long, Africa has risen for others, but stayed silent for its own. It is time we rise for ourselves. So if you are watching this wherever you are, in America, in Europe, in Asia, or across Africa, please remember this moment. Share it. Speak about it. Use your voice. Because the real battle for Sudan will not be won by soldiers. It will be won by citizens, by ordinary people who refuse to look away. And if you believe that truth is more important than headlines, that humanity is more valuable than gold, then stand with Sudan today, not tomorrow, not when it's convenient, now. Because peace, real peace, begins when silence ends.